What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Run Pure Sports NBA Hardwood Show. We got a little bit of a different look today. We got the Up to Lock show for you on Sunday, and we're live from the RPS party. We got Bryce. Look at Bryce in the background with the TVs and everything. Bobby is in the, I don't know if I call it penthouse suite or the guest room. So we got a good time here over at Run Pure. Bryce, talk to you first. How are things going for you?
Had a nice drive in. Had a nice lunch with Travis over here. Same with Bobby. Scooped in from the airport. Just got into town. Ready to break down the slate, and there's nothing better than hitting winners like when everyone's together. So celebrate some Run Pure at the top.
Yeah, I was talking with, I think it was Kev. I was saying, oh man, shipping stuff tonight with those TVs behind you and everyone rooting at home. It'll be a good time. I almost took some stuff down rooting at home with Big T last night. Didn't get the job done, but maybe it's because we're trying to do it tonight. We'll try to get the job done. We'll try to help you guys get to the winner circle as well. Bobby, I'll go on over to you first. How are you doing? How was your trip out here? And you're on the playbook as well. So while I have you here too, give a little bit of a quick breakdown of the slate, after some of the shenanigans.
Yeah, I mean, it was a solid flight in. Got to have an airport beer with old JT Hayes in Atlanta. Him, myself, and JBC were on the flight from Atlanta to Lexington. I'm up in the Twin Cities area, so unfortunately no direct flights from Minneapolis to Lexington, but it was a solid flight. It took us forever to get off the tarmac. I was texting JT as we were trying to leave in Atlanta, getting a little bit tilted that it's like an hour-long flight, and I feel like we were just sitting there at the tarmac for a solid 45 minutes. But other than that, I'm doing well. It's great to be here in Lexington with everyone, and should be a fun slate tonight. Yeah, I did the playbook. Had a good amount of time this morning too, especially with all the travel to break everything down. It's definitely one of those slates as far as a quick preview of things. You're going to want to be heavy on the early stuff. The Hornets-Raptors game is going to be, I think, the best game on this entire slate. I love that game. The Spurs and Pacers game looks like a really elite game environment with some solid plays in that game, and then some solid plays in the Suns-Thunder game too. So those are the main three games we're going to be on. And, 100K up top. Hopefully we've got someone that's in this house or one of the members that are in place to ship 100K in the main slate.
Yeah, that would definitely be ideal to have a nice little opportunity. Or, of course, hope to be able to root on the members as well. Bryce, I'll shift on over to you. Give a quick breakdown of how you're handling things. Obviously, that Donnie Mitchell news is massive. We're assuming he's out. A lot of people are adjusting for it. So talk a little bit about how you're handling this late. Because, again, there's a lot of good plays early on, and we're going to have to lock into them. And we might not have the Cavs lineup, but I think we can get a pretty good idea of what to do.
Yeah, some of the bigger late news, I'm assuming Mitchell's out, is LeVert. Because if LeVert's out too, that makes Strus and the rest of the team, Garland included, even stronger. Agree with Bobby on Charlotte, Toronto. That's a really strong game all around, from the Charlotte studs to even Kelly Olynyk. I'm going to expect to start for Scotty Barnes. This is their first game without him after he fractured his hand. Interesting note here, FanDuel left off the 9:30 game. DraftKings kept it on, and we got Booker out in that game. So you don't have the Suns plays on FanDuel, so I think the studs will be a little more condensed there than they will on DraftKings. And then you got my guy Wemby in the nut matchup against Indy. Super paced up game, not a lot of defense, a lot of pace, a lot of scoring. Should lead to a lot of fantasy points in that game. Detroit Orlando kind of looks like the worst one to me here by a good margin, but yeah, I think it's a really good 4 or 5 gamer depending on what site you're playing.
Yep, should be a good overall slate. Let's break it down, and Bobby, let's dive right into the Hornets stuff. Right, Hornets Raptors, one of the early games in the slate, and definitely one of the better ones to get to. But as I was talking to Big T the other day, one of the best spots last night was Portland and Memphis, and I don't know, I had a pretty good night, not playing as much on the Portland side of the ball, and I don't know, man. Do I want to limit Charlotte and Toronto a little bit just because there are some Cavs plays that are going to come up? You could make an argument Charlotte is going to be one of these teams down the stretch where minutes could just be too spread out. And I don't know. I think I want to be more under on these plays, but you sound like you really like this game. You were on the playbook today, so break this thing down.
Yeah, I mean, this game looks fantastic from a DFS standpoint. I mean, majority of every single starter from just a raw projection standpoint is projecting for at least 5x. We've got a few guys that are projected for close to 6x. And when I originally broke this game down in the playbook, Nick Richards was questionable, thought that he was probably going to play, but he's already ruled out. Bruce Brown also has already been ruled out. So even a couple other guys rolled out earlier today. I mean, it's just the type of thing where both these teams are bottom 10 in the league as far as like defensive rating. Neither team is particularly fast. We're used to Charlotte playing a little bit faster. I think part of that with LaMelo Ball being out like hurts them from a pace perspective. But with these condensed roles, as well as both teams not being very good defensively, like it's still an awesome game to target for DFS. Should be a close game too. Toronto, neither team is good defensively. So you've got essentially two bad defensive teams with a lot of condensed usage on both sides. Toronto side, obviously Scotty Barnes is out. He either fractured or broke his left hand, so he's out. Bruce Brown is out. Kelly Olynyk started the second half for Scotty Barnes last game on Friday against the Warriors and had a really nice game. He had previously been playing like mid-20s in minutes. And then for the Charlotte side of things, we had an 8-man rotation last time out for them on Friday, and Brandon Miller was out. But we did also have a couple different guys in that are out today. Cody Martin and Seth Curry were in. Seth Curry actually started on Friday. Both those guys are out. So I'm expecting to see probably a 5-man rotation. But I think the only hard thing to predict with Charlotte really is the big situation, because without Nick Richards, like they just don't have a ton of depth in the backcourt. So again, like I said, it's definitely a game where guys are going to have to step into additional minutes and increased usage. So despite the total not being amazing, both teams are not good defensively, and the price tags look really nice. And I'm have a ton of exposure to this game.
All right, Chad is saying my echo's bad. Bobby just gave some good takes. I'm going to give a walk through the house while I go find somewhere else. I'm going to go into a bedroom, but here's the bar right here. So if people want to see, got the nice little pool table.
We've really got Realtor Man going right now.
Yeah, you do have Realtor Man going. So I'm giving you a quick house tour as well. So as we keep going through the house, which it's a pretty sweet place. Here's the air hockey table, right? Bryce is hanging out, chilling, getting the job done. We got, is this Big T? We got to go talk to Big T. We got Big T and Mitch right here watching golf winners, baby. So they're going to get the winners going for everything. So they're watching on the big screen TVs, having a good time. And as we, go into here, we have a nice couple bedrooms, little bathroom action. And I'm going to go in this room over here. I am in the kids' bedroom. So I'm going to post up on this beanbag chair. But Bryce, obviously this is a great game. This is our first non-Scotty game, and Bobby broke it down a little bit. Bobby kind of said, hey, we're going to have like Kelly Olynyk. I was, Kelly Olynyk, right? It's freaking Kelly Olynyk. But if he's going to start, and Brown is obviously this going to be, there's some value on the Raptors that we can't ignore. Now, Bryce, this down cash game perspective, and not just cash, but tournaments too, you have a good sense of value. How do you feel about this value versus the other value later on in Cleveland? Because I think that's going to be one of the biggest talking on this slate.
So I think the best value in this game is Olynyk, and like the Cavs are more beat up at guard. Like you've seen Mobley take over a decent role with the Cavs. The Cavs to me are kind of dependent on LeVert too, because like LeVert soaks up so much usage with the second unit that when he's out, like guys like Mobley and I don't think he quite hurts Garland as much, but they're just less ball dominant players. So I mean, we'll get to that game, but I think Bridges, Miller are super strong here. Quickly has a pretty high price tag, and so does Barrett. But you also haven't seen what they're going to do without Scotty Barnes. Like someone needs to shoot for them. I think kind of an underrated player here is going to be Gary Trent. I think they're going to have to run him out for a lot. He's not really popping in ownership projections as much, so I like him on this slate. And then moving over to the Charlotte side of the ball, I mean, they're just super thin. They're going to run a really small rotation here. I'm interested to see who they have available at center. I think it's a little harder for them to go small with like a Grant Williams type of guy against a Toronto team that's likely running two bigs. So we'll see starters here in 4 minutes, but I think JT Thor could be pretty interesting for Min. I like Micic on this slate. He's a really good point per minute guy, and Trey Mann is pretty strong as well. So as Bobby said earlier, this is definitely a game you want exposure to with the thin rotations and all the injuries.
We're back. I don't know why my internet gave out there, but I'm in a different bedroom. So there you go. Different bedroom with the TV on that'll turn off in a second. Let's shift on over to the next game. Actually, let's do this instead. Talk about the Cavs, right? Because I think the Cavs is a super important situation. I don't know how much Bryce broke it down. I know we're skipping around a little bit, but hey, we do that on Upbox sometimes. So talk about the Cavs situation. I think that's a really important talking point on this slate.
Yeah, let me back up before we go into the Cavs. Actually, besides providing the high-level overview for this game, some additional stuff that I dug into at the first game. I know we want to get to all the games, but I think this first game is the most important game. So one thing to note, Emmanuel quickly started 24 games the last 2 seasons as a starter for the Knicks, and he averaged 41 DK points per game in those games. So, 24 games, big sample size. There were some monster games from Emmanuel quickly as well. He averaged 22.5 points per game, 5.3 boards and assists per game, and close to 39 minutes per game with Tibbs as well. So I think there's a lot of similarities between his situation in New York and today with the Raptors. So obviously he's already been a starter for the Raptors, but Scotty Barnes has a usage rate of about 25%, and Jalen Brunson had a usage rate of about 30% in New York. So, I mean, it's a similar type of setup where he's already the starter too. So I think he's stepping in that same type of role where you can expect him obviously to play monster minutes. I'm seeing from a projection standpoint between 15 and 20% across a few different sites. So I honestly think Emmanuel quickly is too low owned in this spot. His role is going to be absolutely insane. I love him and RJ Barrett. So I just want to call that out from a usage perspective with Emmanuel quickly as far as touching on a couple key plays in this game. I know I mentioned the Hornets rotation last time out, and you guys both mentioned it too, that the Hornets are just thin in the front court. Like, they really do not have a ton of guys in the front court as far as different guys that they can put out there with Mark Williams and Nick Richards out. But I want to note that they did sign Poku a few days ago that was on the OKC Thunder for a little while. And a couple quotes that I saw was that the idea was he's likely to potentially surpass JT Thor in the rotation. So he played for the G League Swarm a couple days ago. I believe he's active and with the team, but I'm not 100% sure. I've been trying to search for the last half hour, and honestly, I can't 100% tell. I had messaged a couple beat reporters, so I want to call those couple things out and talk about quickly's numbers in particular.
For sure. Obviously, quickly, really good play at his price. I think he's a good option that I would at least get to for sure. Bryce, did you touch on the Cleveland stuff like I asked before? I couldn't tell because my internet completely cut out before. So
yeah,
did you touch much on
that? The Mitchell stuff to me is a little weird just because, he went from questionable to doubtful to out, and now he's back to questionable. He hasn't tweeted that he's going to play, and he always tweets his spider shit and whatnot. So I'm expecting him to be out. Once again, this is a 7:00 game. We do have late swap, so I would kind of build with him being out, but be ready to adjust if he's in. There's decent value in Phoenix. There's guys to spend up on there, and then the Indy San Antonio game is a good game as well. So just try and stay on top of the news here. We're going to take you up to lock for the next half an hour. We might get something a little more definitive here, but could very well go into the slate blind in that situation. You're on mute, Travis.
Come on, Mango.
Yeah, okay. So, my internet keeps cutting in and out. I don't know why mine is and your guys isn't. Maybe my computer's shitty. Who knows? But if so, that is my Onyx reward DraftKings fault. So there you go. But anyways, as we kind of shift over, let's talk about Detroit. Detroit. That game, Quentin Grimes just got ruled out. Not saying it's a big deal, but it's not nothing here. Bobby, talk about Orlando and Detroit. Obviously, one team we like to target is the Detroit Pistons in DFS. So is this a spot you're looking at any Orlando options and some Pistons?
I mean, I don't have a crazy amount of interest in this game for the Detroit side of things. Cade Cunningham's gone for 40+ in all 5 games after the All-Star break. He's been playing really well. So I think you can consider Cade, you can consider Jalen Duren, and you can consider Jaden Ivey. I think those guys are all fine. I mean, Quentin Grimes being out helps a little bit. But I don't know, with Isaiah Stewart there now too, I don't know. I think that Stewart, Thompson, those guys are okay for large field stuff, but the main interest is in Cunningham, Ivy, and Duren, and I don't even know if any of those guys would make a main team. But in large field, they're 20 max stuff. I don't mind getting a little bit of those Detroit guys. And for the Magic, it's a really good matchup for the Magic. These teams just played recently. It was a short slate. Paolo and Franz disappointed a little bit that last time out against the Magic. against the Pistons, but I think those guys are both fine. I don't mind getting to either of those guys. I think that Franz and Paolo are definitely the best two plays for Orlando. I think Jalen Suggs looks okay. You're never super confident in Cole Anthony's minutes, but at his price tag at 4.8 on DK, like it's a fine price tag if you're playing 20 plus teams. I don't mind getting a little bit of exposure to him. And I'll note too, the big thing with Orlando is like the center rotation has just been all over the place this year. Last time when these two teams played, we actually saw Goga play a little bit. Goga got like 8 minutes. Wendell got, I think, 28 minutes, and Mo Wagner played a decent amount too. So I don't trust this Orlando center rotation really at all. If I'm MMEing or even playing 20 max, I put a rule in place that it's max one of those three centers, and it's mainly just Wendell Carter and Mo Wagner that I get to. I think that Mo looks okay, and I think that Wendell looks fine too. So at the price tags, you can get to them, but I can't tell you with any type of confidence like who's going to actually get the run. Wendell Carter could play 20 minutes, and he could play 33 minutes, and I wouldn't be shocked by either outcome.
Yeah, I would agree with you there on that. This is not really a game that I love. You could get pieces of it though, Bryce, but what are you doing with the Detroit side of the ball and the Orlando Magic?
Kind of studs here for me. I think there's going to be a ton of value on the slate, and I don't want to waste too many spots on like questionable value, as opposed to like I think we're going to get great value in the first game. I think we're going to get decent value on the Phoenix side. I think we're going to get really good value on the Cleveland side. So to me, it's more like Banchero, Wagner, and then Carter and Suggs a little bit. Not really interested in the backups a ton here. Orlando's rotations are super deep. Detroit side, you're going to be super different if you play anyone on Detroit here. I prefer Cunningham, Durant, Ivy as kind of like the big three. You can include Thompson on that. He's been playing really solid minutes recently. I like him more on a site like FanDuel, where it's a little more stock dependent as opposed to scoring dependent. But yeah, probably the game I'm going to be lowest on, and I don't really think it's close.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense there. Let's shift on over to let's talk about the Knicks a little bit, right? We didn't really talk about them. Obviously, Cleveland, we got LeVert questionable or very doubtful, right? We have the other options as well. But yeah, I think we just got to talk about the Knicks a little bit. Are there any options here, Bobby, that you are interested in on the Knicks?
It's basically just Jalen Brunson. I mean, if you tell me that Josh Hart's going to play 47 minutes and Tibbs is going to be a madman, like, sure, I'd be interested in Josh Hart if he's playing 47 minutes, but that's obviously not a guarantee. Tibbs played him a shit ton last game. I don't know. There's just not a ton of interest in this Knicks team. I mean, I've got some interest in Brunson. It's not the easiest matchup against Cleveland, but I definitely would rather attack Cleveland on the perimeter than I would in the paint with Mobley and Jarrett Allen healthy. So I think that Brunson looks solid. Hart, DiVincenzo are both going to play solid minutes. If you're doing large field stuff, if you get a little bit of them or Precious or like Bogdanovich, it's fine. Hartenstein's been banged up recently. He seems to be on a minutes limit, according to what like Tibbs and stuff has said. So I think he's going to only play 20 to 25 minutes. So, I mean, it's just a really tough team to get to. They've had guys missing. Guys are priced up. This game is the lowest total on the slate. It's basically just Brunson for me on the Knicks side.
All right, what about you, Bryce? Any interest in that Knicks game there?
I want to disagree with you guys, but I completely hate the Knicks here as well. We've already talked about the Cleveland side plenty. If Mitchell and LeVert sit, like, Strus is a guy I always want to be over on when these guys sit. I don't think he's ever high owned enough for his role when they sit. Mobley, Allen, you could even use Okoro as a punt. Wouldn't really play the backups. I think Sam Merrill would be like the super deep play if you're looking to get like really different. On the Knicks side of the ball, the thing is, like, with all these injuries, these guys are crazy priced up, and Brunson takes so much usage from all of them. Brunson's really the only interest I have here on the Knicks. Like, you could argue for like a Precious one-off, but outside of him, I think the Knicks are going to be my lowest owned team on the slate, right next to Detroit.
Yeah, they'll definitely be a pretty low owned team here, and like one reason why is like, sure, this next game you look at and like there's not a lot of guys out, right? But I mean, it's Indiana and the Spurs. This is a great DFS game. There's tons of really good plays to like here, and honestly, this isn't going to be like a super high owned game. It'll have some ownership, but it won't be as high owned as some of these other spots. You could argue there could be some plays that really win you the slate here. So, Bobby, break down this game. How do you handle the Pacers side of the ball versus the Spurs?
I mean, it's tough with the Indy side of things. Indy, I'll start with that side because it's just easier, more brief to break down. I mean, Rick Carlisle, his rotations, especially when this team's healthy, it's fucking super frustrating. So I like Tyrese Halliburton. I like Pascal Siakam. I think Miles Turner's okay, but with Aaron Nesmith back, it's just super hard to get excited about this Pacers team. I mean, this has got the highest total on the slate. So, if you want to take a shot on some of these secondary plays for the Indy that are low owned and in single digits, I don't think it's crazy. Like TJ McConnell's been playing awesome. Neesmith's had some good games recently. I mean, Mathurin can get hot technically. But it's really tough with this Pacers rotation, the way that Rick Carlisle runs things out. So I like Tyrese Halliburton the best. He's projected to be, I think, between single digits and like low teens in ownership. And like Bryce said, we've got a ton of value, so it's easy to get to Halliburton. So I think from a roster construction standpoint, highest total on the slate, Halliburton has a monster ceiling. I think that Halliburton definitely looks like the best play for the Pacers, and then Siakam and Turner would be fall behind him. And for the Spurs, we've already gotten news that Lakey Branham's going to start for Champagny. So, I mean, I think that Branham grades out as solid. Him, Wesley are going to be a couple of the guys that benefit probably the most. Keldon Johnson probably should get some more minutes. He's projecting for a ton of ownership. I mean, these mid-tier plays on San Antonio look solid against Indy. I hate trusting Greg Popovich lineups, but I think all the mid-tier guys for San Antonio are solid. I ranked them on a point per dollar basis in the playbook. So I think they all look solid. Like, I'm not dying to get to any of these guys. And then obviously Wemby looks good at 10-4. He's played 30 plus minutes the last two games, 34 and 32 minutes. And the duel with Chet, he went for 73 points. Last game he went for like 53 as well. So, I mean, Wemby's balling out. He's power forward eligible, playing center against Indy, who has terrible defense. These teams are 2-3 in pace. So I think San Antonio looks good. Wemby's the main priority, and I'll have exposure to all these mid-tier plays on the Spurs. But it's hard to trust the Spurs, like with some of these mid-tier plays and cheapies, but there's a bunch of guys in play for the Spurs for me.
Yeah, you definitely have to consider him, right? You have to consider Victor Wembanyama. You got to consider Devin Vassell. There's definitely plays that you have to like here on the Spurs. And of course, I think some of these Pacers pop. But to be fair, with there being so much good value, that's when I get cautious about playing too many Pacers. So that's one thing. When I'm in SaberSim, I'm going to go and limit it here as we're breaking things down. Bryce, what's your overall thoughts here on how to handle this Pacers and Spurs side?
All right, so I'm going to circle back real quick. We got some news from that first game. Micic is starting, and Agbaji is starting instead of Kelly O. So that kind of switches up your value. Definitely like Kelly less. I think there's a decent chance they don't play double bigs with him in total quite as much as we had expected them to if Kelly was starting. So I think there's a lot of risk to that Kelly play now. Micic starting is super interesting to me. I think he's absolutely one of the best plays on the slate. Nobody really knows who he is, but he's a really good fantasy point per minute guy. Even in a lower scoring game, I think that he's going to get, play a really ball dominant role compared to what you might expect him to. So that's kind of touching back on the first game, getting to the San Antonio Indy game. I don't love the value in these games quite as much. I really like the studs here. Wemby, Halliburton, Wemby's, I think, too expensive on FanDuel, but there's not a lot to spend up on. There's a lot of value, and he's the best stock player probably ever. So, I think you really do want Wemby exposure here. If Branham starts, I think he's like the one value guy I'd really love in this game. You have two pretty healthy teams. So, I like Micic ahead of him, but I think Branham's definitely in play as well. Vassell, pretty solid, nothing special. Trey Jones and SoCan, I always end up being over on. The Spurs I'm over on in general, just because, they have such volatile rotations that it leads to like these guys being able to have ceiling games for a little bit, like depressed price tags. Keldon Johnson, if he's playing this 30-minute role, I know he only had 19 last game, but the game before he had 36. I think he has a ton of upside at 5,200. Moving over to Indy, it's pretty much Halliburton, Siakam, Mathurin, and Turner for me. Don't really want anything to do with like the secondary Indy pieces. I think it's a really good pace-up matchup against Spurs here, and I like all of them a lot. I think Halliburton might be one of the most overlooked players on the slate. And, Miles Turner at only 6,600, while Wemby, like, stands out as a great defender, like stock wise. He still gives up like a decent amount of easy buckets, and opposing centers have been underowned against him all year. So I definitely like Miles in this spot as well.
Yeah, Miles McBride is definitely going to be someone that you have to be watching for. I think he's going to be kind of a core play, and I think Mishik becomes very much you'll see a lot of cores over here at Run Pure that people will be all over him. He's easily going to become one of the elite values. Bobby, why don't you circle back to some of these points here now with the Charlotte Hornets? Because you like these guys. I'm going to like them too, and we're going to have to consider them. But to be fair, like we have these Cleveland plays that are going to be really good too. So I think that's another thing to think about. But what do you think of this Charlotte situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Mičić becomes like arguably like one of the best like 2 or 3 values on the slate. I think it hurts Terrence Mann a little bit, and I see Grant Williams is starting at center. I mean, Grant Williams is just going to sit in the corner. I tend to not like Grant Williams when he's chalky. I think he's in play for sure still, but I don't know. I think the other guys have definitely higher usage. It's just a matter of with Grant Williams, is he going to hit his like open threes or not? Like, and that's not a spot that on chalky Grant Williams. I like being on the side of hoping that Grant Williams hits his open threes. So I like the other 4 starters for the Hornets more. And I agree with Bryce that with Kelly O not starting, I think it hurts him a little bit. So I think that Kelly O is still very solid. He's still a guy that I liked even while playing like mid-20s in minutes. So I think he looks solid. I'd probably have him from a projection standpoint. I'm looking to see what update projections look like, but still like high 20s, maybe like 30 points or so from a projection standpoint. So I still really like Kelly O, but I don't think it becomes like the same type of like slam in your lineup play now that he's not starting. And I think that Agbaji's okay. We've seen when he started for like the Jazz, he's not the highest usage guy, but he's trying to be higher usage like in like summer league and some of those other spots. So I think that Agbaji is still solid. And the other thing too to call out, we've seen Jordan Nwora start like at power forward when guys have been out for the Raptors, and Nwora not play like crazy minutes even as the starter. So like I'm still not convinced that Kelly O is still not going to play like 30 plus minutes, even though he's not starting technically. It's just you don't need the size against the small Hornets team.
Yep, starters are Mishik, Mann, Miller, Bridges, and Grant Williams. So got that news, obviously, so you guys can make your adjustments for that. And it's going to be a slate where you're going to like these early guys. But like I said, I don't know, man. The Cleveland guys, you got to like them too. And I might limit some of these options, like the Kelly Olynyk. Like, I don't want to be super high on them now. I think there's a lot of routes where it could go really poor for someone like him. And yeah, if they do decide to run him out there a lot more, yeah, he'll probably crush against Charlotte. But his ownership has been very high all day. Are people going to adjust properly? I'm just not sure. I think that it could lead to some opportunities here. If you guys have questions, please fire them off in the chat. Also, hit that like button. We would appreciate it. Joe Ruff has a question. He's one of the members over here at Run Pure, so I'll fire that one to someone. Bryce, Kelly Olynyk and Podol, okay together or separate them? How would you handle that situation now with that news?
So if I'm playing 1, 3, or 20 lineups, I'd probably separate them. And if you're playing 150 teams, I would probably keep them together. It's a brand new situation here without Scotty Barnes. Do you think they're going to play 2 bigs at the same time against Charlotte, who's pretty much decimated center position? I don't think so. So, I think it's possible they both still get there on a smaller slate like this. If I'm building between 1 and 20 lineups, I would make a rule to separate them. If I'm building over 20 lineups, I would not keep them separate. It's kind of how I'd approach it.
Gotcha. What do you think about those two now, Bobby? Like, how are you handling? I mean, yeah, you just talked about Kelly Olynyk, but how are you handling him like with these other options? Because I think you got to be a little cautious.
I mean, I've liked playing Kelly O. I think you're right, though. People might not completely adjust to the news, but like I still just think that he's been closer in the games that he's played all the way in Toronto since he's been there. His usage rate's been up at like 5% or so. So you just have so much usage up for grabs with Scotty out. The fact that he started the second half for him, like I still just think that Kelly O is probably going to play like high 20s in minutes. So high 20s in minutes of Kelly O going to be over a fantasy point per minute, like really solid usage rate. Like I still just think Kelly O is really solid. I think him and Poto will play some together. So I mean, if I were MMEing, maybe I'd consider like some type of like rule more so with Toronto not to get like too many of those guys, but like I would make a rule to not play those 2 guys together.
Yeah, I somewhat agree there. That when I go through right now, which I'm putting my MME stuff in, I'm going to look at the Raptors, and Listen, I want to be able to swap to these Cavs. I don't know. It sounds like I'm a little higher on these guys than you are. Like, I just think they're very, very good options that you totally can't ignore on this slate. Like, and that'll just get you like a really balanced build. I've noticed the Cavs builds, like when we've had Donnie Mitchell out, it's definitely led to more of these like balanced constructions. I don't know if that matters or anything, but I just think that's something that'll happen for sure. If you start getting a bunch of those Cavs, I want to get overweight on them. And I think it's not going to be too hard to get overweight just because I think all the projections are really pushing the Hornets guys right now. And not that they're bad plays, but I just want to think about that. Do you have any, one more questions fire in the chat, Bryce? Do you have any ideas of of limiting any kind of like teams? Like, do you want to have like, let's say like less Hornets or more Cavs? Like, what's kind of some of the stuff you're looking at rules wise with some of these teams, Bryce?
So Charlotte, I'm allowing 4 of. I'm allowing 3 on every team besides them in Cleveland. Charlotte, Cleveland, I'm allowing 4. Every other team, I'm allowing 3. Just because I think Garland and Mičić end up being the best plays here, like on the entire slate. So like, I don't want to limit my combinations with those 2 players. So like, if you're locking someone, or like you're playing like a crazy amount over on someone, I would allow 4. Otherwise, I'd allow 3. There's just really good value on the slate, and like, I don't think you want to be too condensed in this one single team here.
Yeah, NJ's got a question. On FanDuel, Gary Trent, or do I take the value with Oche? Bobby, what do you think of Gary Trent versus Akbaji there?
I take Gary Trent. I like Gary Trent. I think he's a little overlooked. I think he's honestly a little bit too low on the slate.
Okay, here's a Charlotte guy. I don't know if we've talked that much about this Charlotte guy. I'm just trying to double check. I don't think we have. What do we think about not JT Hayes, JT Thor? What do we think of JT Thor here? Because he's a really good fantasy producer when he gets the opportunity. I actually think he could be a really interesting tournament play. Bobby, I'll kick that one to you, and then I'll kick it to Bryce after. But what do you think of JT Thor?
I don't like him. I think there's a chance that we see Poku. Like, they signed Poku, the season's over. I'm still trying to figure out if he's technically active. I think that he is. Like, I'd rather take a shot on Poku, who is a pretty good fantasy point per minute type of guy. JT Thor is only okay, in my opinion, from like a fantasy perspective. So I'd rather roll the dice on a Poku that's going to be like 1% owned or less on the slate.
What about you, Bryce? What's the thoughts on like some of these bench guys, like a JT Thor? Any other like interesting bench options that could come out of nowhere?
I'm higher on JT Thor than Bobby is here. I know they signed Poku, but first game on the team, I'm always skeptical of the role that they'll have. JT Thor at stone min price. I much prefer Mičić's value, but I'm definitely going to have some 4 teams out there.
Yeah, that I kind of feel similar to that as well. Let's see, Bryce, if you have a FanDuel core, people are asking for a FanDuel core. I don't know if you can get that together. If you can, that's great.
I was busy building my teams here while we're on the show. I'm not used to doing the up to lock.
Yeah, same.
So here, I'll put up my FanDuel right now. Give me 1 second for all our subscribers.
All right, fire it up. Bobby, favorite play below 3,600 or less?
Honestly, I think it's probably Poku. I think that Bertans is definitely safer. I'll say Bertans over Poku. I'm getting more Bertans right now in my runs, but I'd say Bertans or Poku. I don't mind taking a shot on some of those like cheapies in the Charlotte front court, and they're very thin there.
All righty, there you go. Let's see, any other questions? 2v2. We're gonna go Grady. We're not gonna say his other name because people want me to say it. Grady or Kelly Olynyk, or Trent or Grant Williams. So Bryce, Mr. Grady Dick or Kelly Olynyk, or Gary Trent and Grant Williams?
This one to me is super easy. Gary Trent, Grant Williams.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel there as well. Let's keep moving along. Bobby. So any SE locks, I can do that one. I think Mičić is probably the SE lock. There's a lot of really good plays on this slate. So that's another thing that I would mention. Trevor Bryan asked, can we repeat the Cleveland situation? So Donovan Mitchell and Karis LeVert both doubtful. We're assuming they don't play. Bobby, do you have any thoughts to add to the people on the Cleveland situation specifically?
Well, are they doubtful according to Basketball Monster? I haven't seen anything on like Underdog. Like I guess I'm just not 100% sure if they're doubtful or questionable at this point. I'm leaning that they're out, but I guess I'm a little bit less confident than you two that they're out.
I don't know, Bryce. What is your opinion? I think they're out. I mean, we saw doubtful from. I thought we saw doubtful from underdog. No.
Well, so Mitchell went from questionable to doubtful to out, back to questionable. I think he sits. Dude tweets every time that he's not going to play or when he's not playing, and he hasn't been wrong in years. He hasn't tweeted today. I think you play it as him out, and then you can always adjust with late swap if they're in. But yeah, right now I have Mičić and Garland locked. So I'm going to have to do a lot of late swapping if they do play. But I'm definitely playing it as Mitchell and LeVert out.
Okay. Let's see here. Other question. Struss versus
no,
Kelly.
I might play LeVert and Mitchell out.
Yeah, I'd agree on that.
I'm deciding between two files. LeVert's easier to swap out, and I don't really think I want Mitchell. So I think that's what I'm going to do here.
Yeah, I don't think you really want to get to Mitchell even if he's in, to Bryce's point. Like, it's definitely easier to swap off of LeVert. I think the big thing too is with Cleveland though too. Like, I mean, if you want to, like, if you have a lineup that you really like with like a Mičić or like a Trey Mann, I mean, I think if both those guys are out, like, Merrill becomes viable. So, like, if we're talking about like off the board plays for Cleveland, I need both those guys out to consider Sam Merrill, and I think Merrill's like okay, but it's more so like Struss. I definitely like if Mitchell's out. If both those guys are out, like, I think that Struss looks way better, and I essentially just want to shift all of my like LeVert to Bryce's point. If you're running stuff and you're getting some Karis LeVert with Mitchell out, you can easily just turn those LeVert shares into Max Struss and make some like 2v2s or 1v1 swaps.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with a lot of that. Plays of the day. You guys got plays of the day that you're very high on?
Yeah. I'll give you two plays of the day because we're at the party and feeling hot. Garland and Mičić. I don't think you overthink them. Lock them in. If Mitchell's in, obviously get off Garland as a core play. But yeah, I don't see how you avoid these two on this slate.
Yep, I would tend to agree. Bobby, what do you got? I would say Quickly is going to be my guy. Quickly be my play. What about you?
Oh, I absolutely love Quickly. Quickly is in my core, one of my favorite plays on the slate. But outside of that, like, I'll talk about two studs. Like, KD's averages without Devin Booker in the lineup are pretty nuts, averaging like 53 or 51 DK points per game without Booker in 10 games this season. So I love KD, and I think that Tyrese Halliburton's going way overlooked. So I like both those guys as a stud. I love Quickly. I love both the plays that Bryce mentioned. We're in Kentucky. We're feeling generous. I don't know how many plays of the day we just grabbed out there. I'd probably grab like 5 or 6 plays of the day.
I think you can make an entire team.
Yeah, there we go. We're for the people today.
Yep, definitely agree with you guys on that. If LeVert is in, do you prefer him with Struss? So, Bryce, talk about the LeVert in out. Like, how are you handling that? I know you talked about the CSV a little bit, but what's your thoughts there?
Here, 1 second. All right, Struss and LeVert. I don't really love Struss unless LeVert's out. If LeVert's out, I think it's a super easy swap to Strus. Like, if you want to make it easy on yourself, you can just play one or the other and then late swap them in for each other. Like, I would just go with the more expensive one, and then you can just swap to the cheaper one. If they're both in, I prefer LeVert to Struss. If LeVert sits, I'm going to end up with a decent amount of Struss on this slate.
There you go, Bobby. What's your thoughts on how to handle that situation?
Yeah, same as Bryce. Like I talked about, like, you just plan for Mitchell out, plan for LeVert in. You just can easily change your LeVert shares to Struss.
There you go. Let's see. Would you play Struss and Garland together? Yeah, I think you can. What do you think about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you got both guys out, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that at all. I think you definitely would want to, right? I mean, they definitely would be really good plays, and
they'd be two of my biggest overs on the slate if LeVert sits. Even in a tough matchup, I love taking Cleveland in the spot. We've seen this spot a ton. It's made me a decent amount of money this year. Garland to me is a lock. So, like, any Struss I'm playing, it's automatically paired with Garland.
Yep, there you go. Let's see. Other questions. Not sure if you. I mean, Bobby, I guess give some final thoughts to the people. I guess that could help because I don't see any other questions here in the chat.
I mean, my final thoughts are like you want to be heavy on some of the mid-tier and values early and then be able to play the Cavs news. I mean, I just think we're gonna have so much value. Like my favorite three studs on the slate are Wemby, Halliburton, and KD. Like I think it's just super easy to, play a bunch of value and really good plays early and then kind of mix and match with some of those like lower owned studs a little bit later on. So I mean, that's my thought. Like this is a slate where I really want to be heavy on this early game. I want to be heavy on those couple plays from like the Cavs and Pacers side, and then especially if we've got Mitchell and Struss out, like I want to be heavy on Garland, Mobley, and like that's where I want to get on the slate. I don't want to be on the Knicks. I don't love this Detroit Orlando game. Like I only really like Jalen Williams and SGA on the Thunder. Like I think it's fairly straightforward. Like where you want to like really get a lot of your exposure to the slate.
Yep, I agree with you on that. Bryce, what's kind of your thoughts on it? Final thoughts on the slate?
Kind of, I think it's with Michi Chin. I think it's pretty much a pretty easy stars and scrubs slate here. I really like the stars. Wemby would be my favorite one. I like SGA as well. Halliburton, cheap guys. Michi. For those of you who don't know about this guy, I think he's going to have an absolutely great game here. And then, just keep monitor on the Cleveland situation.
Yep, he's the guy I have the most exposure to here today. So I will be loading up. I think he's a great play for obvious reasons. So I will definitely be playing him here. I guess for that, we will get on out of here. Thanks a lot for joining us here on the show. For me, Mangone, and Bryce and Bobby, we'll see you guys later.
Good luck, everybody.
Rum Pier.